over January during part of the interim. The Whetsell Fellowship is something that's awarded every year to a student, and I want to tell you a little bit about how that started. It started in 2006. Dr. William Whetsell gave this fellowship in memory of his brother Dan Whetsell, who's an alum who passed away, who's a wood sculptor who is extremely talented. It's a summer fellowship that allows a Wofford student the opportunity to pursue study in some aspect of the visual arts under guidance of a mentor. The fellowship will cover the cost of art supplies and instruction and culminates with an exhibition in the Richardson Family Gallery, which we are all here to appreciate tonight. So let's give it up for Micah Tiffin.
So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for braving the snow and rain and sleet and horrible weather we had today to get here. I wanted to show you guys, so this drawing is kind of what started my inspiration for a lot of the work that's in here. When I got the Whetsell exhibition, I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and I was interested a little bit in what it was like to be a child, and through that came to crayon. I was fascinated with the idea that crayon would be a fine art medium because it's so contradictory of that. There's very little texturing and detail you can do with it. And when I was playing around with them, I created this sort of playground-like, roller coaster-like environment that with bright colors that reminded me of that time when I was younger and instilled in me a sense of nostalgia. And from that, I moved into painting. So a lot of the paintings that you see came out of switching mediums. I wanted to practice painting and kind of understand for the future because I feel like as being an artist and not understanding what painting is, it's hard to critique and or work sculpturally without knowing that. So from the paintings, I moved kind of into this ideation for my installation. And so there are 4 types of installation outlined by Claire Bishop. I was reading her book that talks about how it's important. The one that I feel like my fort, I think it's important. It's psychoanalytical, which in psychology means that you're dealing with unconscious conflicts. If you know Freud, which you probably do, he talks about that. But I think that mine differs from Freud's ideas in a few ways. So Freud talked about how dreams, which are your unconscious mindset, they're mainly visual, right? And I think that my fort does better to engage some of the other senses that you have. So visually, you see the way the light bounces off the blankets, bounces off the different surfaces, and the way it travels into the fort, and you can see what's happening inside, right? In terms of sound, you can barely hear it, but one of the televisions in there is playing one of my favorite PlayStation games growing up that takes me back to that same experience, right? And then taste, now I hope none of you tried the gummy bears that are inside the fort, but I titled my exhibition Gummy Labyrinth and put some gummy bears inside to remind you of kind of what that sweet taste is like a little bit. The other ones are touch, right? So I think touch is kind of a unique experience where I feel softness when I touch the blankets and I feel the pillows. And I'm thinking about kind of the blankets and warmth and safety with those things. And then the last one, and smell, of course, right? So if you're inside, sometimes you smell balloons because there are balloons hanging. I've been told it might smell like a McDonald's Playhouse in there, which is maybe on point. I think it sort of smells antiquated, a little bit old because there's some older things in there. And then now there's a sense that's not really defined as one of the 5 that's called proprioception, okay? Which is, if you think about when you move your arm at a certain speed, you're moving it at a velocity, and you're aware of where your body is in space. So when you get down on your knees and hands to enter the fort, I like to think that I'm queuing up a memory in your mind of another time that you've been on your hands and knees as a child playing or been interested in something and had to say if you had a crawl space in your house, or crawl space, you tried to crawl amongst one of those small spaces and it's cozy and it's safe, right? So those are the ways that I think about the visual or the senses within an installation. Another part is the psychoanalytical installations are made of constitutive parts, which means they're broken up into distinct categories. So when you dream, I doubt it ever feels narratively accurate and that you understand everything that's happening. You can usually, after you wake up from a dream, understand oh, that makes no sense because you were from a unique perspective. The same thing happens with installation art. It's really hard to put this into a portfolio because you can't really photograph it. You can't understand the full work by taking one picture. You would have to take thousands of pictures from thousands of different angles, and you really never understand what it's like to be inside. So I think in that way, I'm using that part of what it would be like to be dreamlike. The last part to Freud's idea of psychoanalytical is that it's about experience and it's unique to the person. So when I say dreams, I'm not exactly talking about when you're asleep and you're in REM and you're late at night. For me, the world can sometimes be boring or sometimes painful and difficult to deal with. So for example, when I'm in class in high school and I'm learning about something that I've already understood before, my mind starts to wander. And it starts to wander these creative spaces that I've created in my mind that are safe and happy and joyful to me. And I think that people's interactions with this installation are going to be somewhat similar, or that's what I would hope for. However, all types of experiences that you have are important to the artwork. A lot of people think of art as having a meaning or a purpose, right? And the point of an installation isn't for me to define you what that purpose or meaning is. It's for you to have your own kind of interaction with it and your own creative experience. So mine is a certain way, and I'm sure all of yours are different as well. And so that's why I think of it kind of like a daydream, right? Because when you're asleep, it's much more of your brain thinking back to the memories that you've already had. Where you're daydreaming, you have more of a conscious choice over where you go and what you think about. So I like that analogy a little bit more. Okay, from there, I'm going to talk about a little bit of how I see it as an escape. Now, it's probably artistic suicide to make an analogy about a country song. But there's a song called Knee Deep that begins with, I'm going to put the world away for a minute. And I really like that line because it reminds me of what I'm doing when I'm making artwork. It's very therapeutic for me. And when I'm inside of it, I can escape the world that I'm in and the reality that's around me. And I can put it away for a minute and think about something creatively. Another part of this fort. So I don't know if you guys know this. Yesterday, I had a group of 13 or so children come and I taught them a course inside of the fort. And it didn't go exactly how I expected. When I was thinking about my childhood, I was destructive for a little window of time. The kids who came in were certainly destructive. They took everything out of its place. My favorite one is a kid just punched the cardboard as hard as he can and looked at me like, is this cool? And it was funny. I think they were gauging me to understand how to interact with it. But then I talked with Professor Scott Felder. I don't know if she's here. She was explaining to me that kids' creativity comes from testing the limits and rules of things. And I think that when that kid punched the wall, that he was being creative. He was thinking outside the box and the rules of what's acceptable. And when kids are drawing on the walls and things, they're doing the same thing. So that was a different interaction for me. Another part is the ephemerality, or I don't know if that's a word, but it's an ephemeral installation in that I will have to tear it down eventually. Next month it's going to come down and the space that I've created will no longer be here. And I like to think that some part of your memories will keep it alive. And that's kind of one of the last parts of an installation is you create a space that people can come and experience and interact in and create their own memories with. And hopefully that happy memory that you had inside will last into the future and be what you can think of when you daydream. Now, that's how I see my installation. The last thing I kind of want to talk about are some of the through lines in my work. I think about these three pieces as having a communication with each other: the sculpture, my paintings, and this installation. This piece is kind of a commentary on balance and childhood and play, and so, just another use of objects that I find interesting. So if you look around, you'll find some objects that rear their heads in different places. For example, tires, ladders, noodles, and crutches, right? And each one of these things has a unique interaction with the body. Tires, for me, support you off the ground when you're in a car, and they're very banal. They're very banal objects. I like mixing dark, banal objects that I feel are part of reality with my own created reality and juxtaposing those things. The ladder, the crutches, and the noodles, for me, are different ways that your body interacts with space. When you're using crutches, they're supporting your weight upon you. Same thing with the ladder. It allows you to do things that your body wouldn't typically be able to do. If you look in this sculpture, I'll walk over here a little bit. If you look at this sculpture, I was wandering around Lowe's thinking about different objects I can use to create work. And I saw these noodles, and they're a stark contrast to the pool. I don't know if any of you guys went to a lake or a beach and you had those like long pink, there's some inside, but the pink or blue or neon pool noodles that you would float in. But it reminded me of those. But these are actually tubing that helps conduct heat through pipes, right? So they serve a completely real and kind of uncreative purpose, right? And I like that idea. But in creating this sculpture, I had chosen that object, but then I found a unique interaction with space, where it's like if you look at just the negative space, you see kind of like a sketch or a drawing that's uplifting. And also, I think that the chairs there's a huge relationship with chairs in the body as well, where it supports you and it's a place that you can sit and interact. So to finish with my exhibition, I'd like you to each experience what you can from my fort, from my paintings, from my sculpture. Think about the ways that your body interacts with it. Think about the memories that will be made from experiencing what's here, and use that to move on in your creative endeavors and lives. So thank you guys so much for coming.